Coming up on ReFramed.
This week's special guest, which is Graeme Innes, and today we'll be discussing the Peanut Butter Falcon.
I love the name. I love all the South American, Southern American stuff in the movie. It's awesome, the accents and.
Almost for a second was like, oh no, they're going to fall into a trap here. And
I have nothing much but praise for this film. I thought it was quite genuinely a nice film.
So welcome back, everyone, to ReFramed, the podcast that reframes how disability is portrayed in film and TV. I'm your host, Jason Climo, and today I have the wonderful Stephanie Dower with me as my co-host, along with this week's special guest, which is Graeme Innes. And today we'll be discussing the Peanut Butter Falcon, which is a very interesting film, and I'm very excited to get stuck into analysing that one. But before we do, let's learn a bit more about Graeme.
Sure. Well, I was a commissioner at the Human Rights Commission for about 10 years. And after that, I have become a consultant and a company director. So I now sit on about 4 or 5 different boards of organisations, for-purpose organisations. And when I left the commission, I realised that the major barrier that people with disabilities experienced in Australia was the attitude barrier. So I and a few other people founded Attitude Foundation, which of course, having made the Perspective Shift series, is making the ReFramed podcast with you two and Robin, and it's in my podcast app of choice, one of my favourite podcasts.
I think you said you were maybe our number one fan.
Oh, well, I'm certainly a fan. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, we love it.
It's always nice to talk to a fan. Graeme, do you want to just talk a bit about, we were talking just before, the two of us, and can you just sort of share your thoughts on what representation in things like film and television actually do to combat that attitude barrier that you were talking about?
Well, you cannot be what you cannot see. And so if we're not seeing people with disabilities on screens, on our smart screens or on our television screens or movie screens, then we're not getting a true picture of the whole population. And so I think it's critical. I think it's critical to people with disabilities getting jobs, being able to participate and interact in the community, and to full inclusion. So we have to get better representation on screens. And I think 4% currently is the Screen Australia numbers, and they've done the research on it, and that just sucks in terms of what the real population numbers are, between around 21%.
Yeah, and I guess on that, like I've heard you talk a lot about percentages, and quotas is something that I wanted to ask you about. Is quotas something that you feel is a good way to reform the industry, like all of our creative industries, in terms of becoming more inclusive and representing people with disability?
I'm careful, Jason, not to use the word quotas, not because there's anything wrong with the word, but because of the pejorative meaning that it's now received. So quotas are viewed negatively because we have to get a certain percentage of people, whether it's women or people with disabilities or people from different cultural backgrounds. I use the word targets, and my target is 21% because that's where we sit in the population. But I'm very convinced that if we don't set targets, we won't move the needle on this at all, because we haven't really, with a few small exceptions, set targets for employment of people with disabilities, and the unemployment gap between people with disabilities and the general population sits at 30%. We are 30% less employed than the general population, and that gap has not changed in 3 decades. So it's quite clear to me that the only thing that works is targets.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's so important. I think it's about language, isn't it? It's about, here we go, reframing how we think about that. A quota sounds like something that we have to do, we're forced to do. Whereas a target is something we can aspire to, something we can reach for.
Well, yeah, and not just aspire to, but want to do. And so we in business, everywhere else, we set targets. It is, there's ethical reasons. It's just the right thing to do, to include all members of the community. And it's the right thing for a range of reasons. Firstly, because a fully inclusive community will be a stronger community because everyone's participating, everyone's putting in. There are no barriers. And what it will do is move people with disabilities and others off welfare and into paying tax. So we'll actually build the economy. And when you go to a function, whether it's a barbecue or a Christmas party or a cocktail function, the first question people ask you is, what do you do? So we rate people by their jobs and the fact that they have jobs. So if we've got a 30% jobs gap, as I've described, then there's significant social disadvantage for people with disabilities as well as economic disadvantage. So inclusion means everyone wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
So true.
I love that. Was there anything else you wanted to school us on before we move on? I feel like you're just such a beacon of knowledge that I'm like, we need to just share as much as we possibly can.
Oh, you're very generous, Jason. Look, I certainly want to raise some issues as we talk about the movie. No doubt we'll talk more about inclusion and stuff like that. I also want to raise the question of audio description because it's the reason I don't watch that many movies because most movies or many movies are not audio described.
Yeah.
And as we get to talk about Peanut Butter Falcon, what I plan to do, because I couldn't watch it with audio description, I couldn't find audio description for the movie, and what I would normally do is then watch it with someone else and get them to fill in the gaps. I chose not to do that this time, and I want to share those gaps with you.
So the Peanut Butter Falcon came out in 2019 in cinemas here in Australia, and it is an adventure drama that tells the story of Zach, who is a young man living with Down syndrome or trisomy 21. He's living in a residential nursing home over in America, and he has an obsession, a dream to become a professional wrestler, and has an idol. And he sets out on this, basically he escapes from this nursing home and sets out on this nomad's adventure, who he teams up with Shia LaBeouf. And the two of them embark on this adventure to find this idol wrestler that Zach has. And it's what the classic buddy film, in my opinion. It's two guys out in the lamb, they're just making their way to their destination any way they can. And it's a fun adventure. It's a very interesting adventure, I will say that.
There's definitely a lot of interesting moments throughout. So Graeme, what were your initial thoughts, I guess, on the portrayal of disability?
Well, I really liked the film. I thought that the film showed genuine friendship, not token friendship, where both friends had something to bring to the relationship. Zach brought his strength, his contribution, his focus, and his buddy brought skills as well. And it's opposed to the general portrayal of people with disabilities as sort of helper or helpee. I love the desire for self-determination that lives in most of us with disabilities, although it's often held back by the community. I really enjoyed the right to take risks and enjoy life. And the character was really charismatic. So I really loved it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Me too. I was a big fan. I think one thing I would say is like a bit of a content warning for anyone who hasn't already watched it is the R word is used a fair bit throughout. And it was an interesting one though, because often I really don't enjoy films where that word is used, but the way that it was used and the way that it was kind of unpacked and I guess used as a tool to demonstrate like the everyday ableism that people with disability do face in the real world was quite interesting and I guess meaningful. whereas it wasn't, it was explained quite well. Whereas I feel like I've watched films before where the R word was used, where I was like, I don't think this was explained well enough, that this is not an acceptable word to be using. Like I feel like, young children watching that film would watch that and see the word used and be like, oh, this is not a good thing to be doing.
There was a really powerful scene towards the end of the movie between Shyla and Eleanor, who was the I think became the love interest in the end, but she was Zach's social worker at the start, and I thought there was a very powerful scene where her desire to care was challenged by his desire, Shyla's desire to support Zach in his quest for freedom and achievement. And they both spoke very strongly in that scene, and I thought it very powerfully addressed that R word question that you're talking about, Jason.
Definitely. Yeah. Steph, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with everything you guys are saying. I really enjoyed this film. It was really refreshing to see a young man living with disability, in this case, Down syndrome or trisomy 21. And he had, like, the story was his. It wasn't sort of about the world around him. It was his story, his journey.
Yep.
And he really had, I read a few articles leading up to our chat today, and they talked about how he had agency in the film. And he was the one that kicked off his journey. It wasn't like something happened to him. No, he made it happen. And that stayed with him throughout the entire journey, with this guy that he meets and befriends. And I love what you said, Graeme, about how, I think something about a buddy film, it's two guys or two people learning from each other on a journey. And that's exactly what you said, Graeme. It wasn't like Shia was just there to guide Zach on this journey. It wasn't like, it was a team. They were a team together.
Yep.
And they each had their strengths, they each had their downfalls. So I thought it was a really fresh perspective on a disability narrative. I haven't seen really anything much like it even since then. Yeah, I have nothing much but praise for this film. I thought it was quite genuinely a nice film.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously the genuine casting is a massive win for us.
Well, did you see so how the film came about? I read this in an article, was Zach he's been acting all his life, and he wanted to be in a feature film, and he came to, I don't know if they were friends before this or he met them somewhere, but he came to the writer directors of the film and was like, I want to be in a feature film. Do you want to, you want to write something for me, or you want to come on this journey with me? And the three of them teamed up, and this is the result. So again, even in real life, Zach himself really had that agency. He made his journey happen. So I thought that was really cool. And that authenticity, that genuineness really came through in the film.
Yeah. Love that. And there was also like other representations of people with disabilities. So there was the blind man who actually shot at them. I've forgotten his name. Yeah, but he cracked me up massively. Like I thought he was hilarious. And I almost for a second was like, oh no, they're going to fall into a trap here and turn this person into, I don't even know what they were going to do with that. Like I thought they were going to play some trick on him and he was going to be blind and he wasn't going to be able to see them and they were going to get away with his boat or something. But that also turned into like a really great moment. Like he was a very valuable person in their journey and taught them a lot as well. So I just loved all the interaction, I think, between, non-disabled people and people with disability throughout. So
it was also good to see, I think you touched on this before, Jason, the risk that each of them took in the film. Like it wasn't a safe sort of thing. Like there is one shot comes back to me where Zach's shooting a gun and the backfire sort of like launches him backwards. And I'm like, usually people with disabilities, again, are portrayed as like these helpless individuals and, they could never do something. They couldn't be capable of something like that. But you see Zach just launch back and it was funny. You were allowed to laugh at that. And it humanizes people with disability, people like Zach. So
the scene that I talked about really emphasizes that point. I just wanted to, agree with you because the scene where Shyla and Eleanor have the argument is all about the difference between her caring and Shyla supporting Zach's dignity of risk and freedom to pursue his goal. So I think what that scene does is just demonstrates that difference, as I said, between Eleanor wanting to care for Zach and protect Zach, and Shyla supporting Zach in his quest for freedom and to achieve his goal. And even when he meets with his hero, or the wrestling school hero, Saltwater Redneck. I love the name. I love all the South American, Southern American stuff in the movie. It's awesome, the accents and the whole scenes. But even when he meets him, he's initially not sort of supportive of training Zach, but he reassesses his position. And that's just another person in the movie reassessing their view or their understanding of a person with a disability. And it's awesome to see those change journeys. I think that really makes the movie even more valuable for me.
Yeah, and then I guess non-disabled audience members in terms of watching the film, I would hope that they sort of go on that similar change journey as well, which is kind of the exciting part and the power, I guess, of media and the whole point why we do this. So
Absolutely.
I know you spoke earlier about some things you didn't love about it, and in terms of the accessibility of accessing, I guess, a fully accessible version of the film. Did you want to touch on that?
Sure. Well, what I didn't love about it, and I won't take points off the movie for this because, maybe I will when we get to our scoring.
I think you should.
But what I didn't love about it was that I couldn't find an audio description of the movie, and so I watched the movie without audio description. Normally, I would try and watch a movie like that with someone else who could fill in the blanks in the movie. And so I do have some blanks in the movie, and I wanted to share that with you because from my perspective as a person who can't see the screen, it just shows the criticality of audio description. So there's one part in the movie, and I've discovered this later, where Shyla wants to steal a boat from these two shrimp fishermen who are sort of portrayed as the bad guys. They're probably not really bad guys because he causes some damage to their business, and a fire occurs, and there's about $12,000 worth of damage to the business. Now I don't know whether he actively lit that fire as a diversion, or whether whether it was incidental or unfortunate. And I still don't know that. And the most sad part for me is that after Zach goes to Saltwater Redneck's training school, all three of them, Eleanor, Zach, and Shyla, head on to Florida, where Shyla was planning to go anyway. And all you get is the conversation about them arriving in Florida. And then there's a country and western song that plays about a house that's set up so it becomes a home. I don't know whether whether Shyla and Eleanor formed a relationship. I think they may have from some of the clues in the movie, but I don't know that for sure. And I don't know where Zach lived in Florida. Did he share the house with them? That's the ending that you would expect, the happy ending to the adventure, but nothing in the movie told me that. So I just wanted to share that with both of you and the audience, because that's a real demonstration of the criticality of the audio description of a lot of the visuals that occurred without any voice interaction to give me the clues as to what was happening.
Yeah, and such a missed opportunity there. They've created this amazing portrayal of disability, but then the fact the industry isn't accessible enough to actually give you the full I guess the full experience is really the way you would say it. Like you don't have
Yeah.
that full experience of that film now because it's not giving you, I guess, the whole picture really.
Correct.
And
So you guys have got to help me out. What happened at the end? Because
yeah, so I was going to say, for your sake, I believe it ends with them like driving off into the distance, and Shia LaBeouf's character sort of puts his hand on Eleanor's shoulder, and then she puts her hand on his. So I think it doesn't actually show what
so
happens.
We don't know.
Really,
we don't know.
but
yeah.
I think the insinuation would be that they do go on and be a family. So, and that there is a romantic interest between Shia LaBeouf's character and Eleanor. So
I'm a romantic, so I'm prepared to. If it's not clear, I'll take that, Jason. Thank you.
We can all just use our imagination and be like happily ever after. I think is the intention. Yeah.
I think that's a really good sort of reflection on, the disability community. Is we're so diverse in nature that just because these filmmakers and Zach himself have experience with one form of disability means that it doesn't necessarily mean that they are across all kinds of accessibility. So it's such a great portrayal, but because they weren't across or they didn't go down the route of audio description, then part of the disability community ironically cannot actually fully access this film. So I think that's something that is very something that a lot of people don't realize with the disability community is we don't know. I don't know the experience of someone who is vision impaired, just like someone who's vision impaired does not necessarily know the experience of someone who is a wheelchair user. So I think that's really important to sort of get more out there instead of lumping everyone together. Sure, there are some shared experiences, but more often than not, we are all very different individual people.
Now, I think it might be time to give our scores out of 5 on the inclusive disability representation scale. Graeme, did you want to kick us off? What did you give Peanut Butter Falcon out of 5?
I love the IDR. I'm really even more a fan of that than the podcast, if that's possible. But I rated it highly because I love the movie, and I rated it highly because the actor was a person with a disability. So you don't have to mark it down for that, Jason, as you often do. I took off half a point because the studio or the company making it available, I got it through Apple, but it's probably available in different forms, didn't provide audio description. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5.
Wow.
Yeah, lovely. Steph?
Yeah, I thought this week was going to be a high week. I mean, which is good compared to last week. We needed a bit of a boost. But I've based all of my IDR scores off the content within the story and the authenticity in casting and all that kind of thing. So I'm actually going to give it a 5 out of 5, which is enough. I think possibly my first 5. So big moment.
I think it is. I feel like you're normally like the harshest of us all. Is that true? Or maybe it's me.
I can be. I feel like we take turns. We can play good cop, bad cop sometimes.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest, whereas I think, thank you, Graeme, for educating me on the lack of access in terms of, on the other end, I guess, of when you're actually trying to watch the film, that it's not fully accessible at this point in time. I would say that I would take off half a point for that. But otherwise, I was coming into this conversation fully intended on giving it a 5 out of 5 because I just absolutely love the way the disability is portrayed. It feels like I feel like when I watch it, I can feel that people with disability had so much agency in actually controlling the narrative. Like it feels so genuine and fun and not like we are these people that are just going to break any opportunity that we have out in the real world. So I think they did such a great job of showing those change journeys. I love that language. I've never heard that before. I'm going to use that all the time now. So thank you. You probably tried to coin that term already, Graeme, but now it's mine.
I just
And I
made
just
it up on the
loved-
run, actually, Jason. So
It's great. I'm using it. Thank you.
yeah, go for it. It's yours.
I love, like, they unpacked so many different stereotypes, I feel,
Yeah,
throughout
yeah,
as well, which
yeah.
is just
Mm.
what we need.
Yeah.
And it was just, all in all as well, it was actually just like a really fun and interesting
It was-
film to watch.
It was
Like,
really
yeah.
engaging. It was really enjoyable. And it, you know,
Mm.
Zach's charisma just leaps off the screen, but he was surrounded by also like really interesting, eccentric characters. Like it wasn't all
Yep.
about Zach either. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a really fun time. People should go watch it.
And I think
Yeah,
that's
absolutely,
also
you
like an important thing to bring up, though, is that like stories that are just like so like focused on the disability or the experience of disability can often come across as really tokenistic, and that's not what's happened here either. So yes, if you haven't watched it, you definitely need to go and watch it. And I think on that note, we should wrap up this week's episode on a very happy and high note, which is great. But let us know what you thought of the Peanut Butter Falcon. Let us know if you've got any questions for Graeme as well. Like I said, huge amount of knowledge and experience here that I feel like we need to be tapping into a lot more, which is great. And yeah, you can find us on all of our social media pages. If you basically just search ReFramed Podcast, you'll find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd love to hear your IDR scores for the Peanut Butter Falcon and any thoughts you had or any kind of little bits of analyses that you might have thought of when you were watching along. It's the whole point. We're trying to turn you all into our little reframers as well, and help keep this conversation about inclusive representation in mainstream media alive. Not just alive, really, actually get the flame caught on so that the industry starts taking a bit more notice of people with disability, the way that we want to be represented, and helps create that change alongside us. Lastly, I really just want to say a huge thank you as well to the Community Broadcasting Foundation, who are helping to fund this series. Obviously, such an important conversation to be had, so we're very grateful to them. Other than that, I think that's it. And thank you everyone as well at home for following along. And we'll see you next time. Bye.